Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Joanne Smedley, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Wing Commander Andy Hoare. We warmly welcome the family of Lance Corporal Thomas Ray Triglone, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors. Please stand and join in the singing of the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. First we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal Thomas Triglone. Popularly known as Tom, Thomas Ray Triglone was born in Goulburn, New South Wales in 1891, the eldest of 7 children born to John and Lily Triglone. The Triglone family moved to Redfern in Sydney when Tom was 5, and 6 years later moved again to Ashfield. Tom attended school in Ashfield before being apprenticed to a tinsmith and ironworker at the age of 14. He later went on to work as a plumber. Triglone enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in August 1915. After a period of training in Australia, he left for active service overseas with reinforcements to the 30th Battalion. He arrived in Egypt as the AIF was undergoing a period of reorganisation and expansion that saw it grow from 2 infantry divisions to 5. As a part of this process, Triglone was transferred to the 45th Battalion. At one point during training, Triglone reported to a field ambulance suffering from exhaustion, but he quickly recovered and was soon back in action. A little over 2 months later, the 45th Battalion was sent to France to fight on the Western Front. In early August 1916, the battalion entered the front line near the French village of Pozières. The men came under heavy artillery fire and fended off at least 2 German counterattacks before being relieved. During this time, Private Triglone was wounded in action, but quickly rejoined his battalion. During the bitter winter of 1916 and 1917, the 45th Battalion alternated between duty in the trenches and training and rest behind the lines, first around Ypres in Belgium and then in the Somme Valley in France. Triglone kept in regular contact with his family, sending cheery postcards to his younger brothers and his family, and never mentioning the hardships of life in the frozen trenches. On the 15th of February 1917, Triglone was promoted to Lance Corporal. A few days later, the 45th Battalion moved up from its position at Fleur and into the trenches near Gardecourt. On the 21st of February 1917, Triglone was manning a Lewis gun in the Storm Trench, a former German trench, at Gardecourt. A shell landed almost directly on his position. Several men were wounded, and Lance Corporal Thomas Triglone was killed outright. He was 26 years old. The location of his grave was never formally identified, and today he is commemorated on the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux, along with 10,738 Australians killed in France with no known grave. After learning of his death, his parents put a notice in the Sydney Morning Herald which read, "He hath fought the noble fight. He hath battled for the right. He hath won the unfading crown, loved by all." Thomas Triglone's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal Thomas Triglone, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you a very good evening.